Well, hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and this is my life as a landlord. I'm so pleased you joined me for today's show. Today, we are exploring the location-specific tenancy guidelines for the state of Georgia. In all of my location-specific episodes, I've included a bunch of hyperlinks to the state, province, landlord, tenant code law, whatever is applicable, in this case, the Georgia Residential Landlord-Tenant Law. Each of my location-specific podcasts is set up in the exact same way, answering the same four questions. One, what are the basics of that location as far as tenancy law? Two, what are the nuances of that location as far as tenancy law? Three, what's some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant in Georgia? And four, where to get help in the local area of Georgia? Where do you even start if you're a landlord there and you need help? As I answer these questions, you'll see me screen share all kinds of documents specific to that location. So you're going to want to watch this on YouTube if you're going to look at the screen sharing aspect of this, but listening on the audio on whatever podcast platform works too. Over the years, I've done lots of these episodes, and in traveling, I've created a bingo card of standard items that I see most often in tenancy laws in all these different locations. At the very end of this episode, I'll go through the bingo card as we go, and I'll help figure out what you need to research more, especially if you have questions. Now, I must tell you, there are more guiding documents than what I'm giving you here. This is not everything, and even if I got it 100% right, which is unlikely, but even if I did 5 minutes after recording, laws can and will change. This episode is designed to get you started and give you some guidance. There may be other things like local, state, province, territory, country, city, things like registering your rental or getting licensed. You won't know unless you dig more than what I'm going to tell you, or even maybe you should hire a professional. Don't know. But this episode is not all inclusive. You've got to do your own research further in your own specific area, but today's episode will at least get you started. I'll give a shout out for today's sponsor, Aloha Capital Investments LLC. If you want to know more what Mike and I are up to about real estate investing, check out alohajv.com. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go screen share right now. Here we are. And this is the first of the hyperlinks, Georgia Landlord Tenant Handbook. And I'm going to bring up, you can't see it, but on the other side of the screen here, I've got the bingo card going as well. So I'll go through this. So you've got Georgia Department of Community Affairs, and this is the link that I put in here, but really what you're looking for is this handbook at the bottom. So the handbook, I'm just going to go ahead and open it in here now. I know there are other pop-ups and things, and I think that we've got several links to this, but that's okay, because if you've got one spot and they've all got the same resource, that's really good. Now, this is 33 pages. Now, it's designed to be a handbook. Typically, if you've listened to any of my location-specific episodes before, I'll start with the law. The law is very legalese. It's usually very long, very drawn out, not really user-friendly. This is the user-friendly version of the law. So at some point, we're probably going to link up with the law, but that's how this kind of thing works. So you see, this is the most revised one from August of 2024. Got a great table of contents and tenant discrimination, entering into a lease, issues during a lease, evictions, housing assistance, affordable housing, miscellaneous items like military service members, family violence, stalking protections, roommates, which is always something that comes up, lead-based paint disclosures, which is federal, foreclosure, manufacturer, mobile homes, and eviction Q&A. Now, I'm just going to go through this as much as possible, and what I'm doing is I'm going to give you a basis for some of these items. So we're going to look for some of the big items like security deposits. Do they talk about renter's insurance, pets, rent increases, abusive access, landlord retaliation, condition inspections, returning of deposits, things like that. I mean, it's sort of the nuts and bolts of each location. And so I'm not going to go into the deep dive of all of these, but you'll see this. And I like this. Right off the hop, it says who is a tenant and then who is a squatter. So a squatter is a person who never had the property owner's permission to come on the property. A tenant is someone who does have the right to possess the property. Discrimination, it talks about the different protected classes. And what happens if a tenant feels they've been discriminated? Okay, so application fees. Application fees may be required and are usually not refundable, even if the application is denied. The application fee may be applied to first month rent. Always get a receipt. So the answer is yes, you can charge an application fee. Um, Background check. Landlords may require you to agree to a criminal and credit background check as a part of the application. I know I do. Absolutely. Information on the application. Landlords commonly request the following information: legal name, social security number, employer's name, job title, annual income, past employment information, references, identity of nearest relative. This is good. Yes. Identity of nearest relative. That is fantastic. I've not seen that. Let's see. Consent for a credit report, criminal record check. Yes. Good. Good, good, good. Leases are important. Leases are a contract. Whoa, show. I like it. So it's talking about what leases can or cannot say. Basically, they've got a list of violations. Violations of the law if your lease says anything like the following. I'll just pick one. The lease says that the landlord does not have to follow local laws. Okay, well, that's wrong. So can't do that. Tenants who dislike certain provisions may ask the landlord to change or update items in the lease. However, a landlord has the right to refuse the request to change the lease, and the tenant must then decide whether to sign the lease or not. Below are examples of what you may want to ask about: very long lease terms and early termination penalties or fees. Fair enough. Automatic rent increases during the lease term, as long as they're within the limits, which we're going to go through here, then they're allowed. References to rules that you've not received. You want to make sure that you're showing this. Yeah. And then access to the unit for a landlord. Written versus oral lease. If you've been listening to the show, you know that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So make sure that you are writing your leases down and that you keep records of everything, right? Here's something interesting: occupancy limits. Georgia does not regulate the number of people who can live in rental housing. However, local ordinances may establish occupancy limits. In addition, the landlord may choose to limit the number of people who can live in the unit. Generally, restricting 2 people to a bedroom is reasonable. Occupancy limits should be clear on the lease. And just so everybody's aware, what I do on my leases is I put on there exactly who is permitted to live in the unit, including the animals, everything. And that way, if they don't have, if someone is in there, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, child, whatever, you have to ask. I mean, this is part of the landlord being good stewards and the tenant being good communicators here. But restricting 2 people to a bedroom is reasonable. So if you've got a 1 bedroom unit, I typically will restrict the heartbeats in the unit to 3, meaning you've got a couple with 1 pet or 1 person with 2 pets, something like that. That's typically how I do it. They do have a hyperlink here to the municipal code about local ordinances. I'm not going to go down there. Lease with an option to purchase. If that's what you want to do, go for it. Security deposit when moving in. Security deposit protects the landlord if a tenant moves out, either owing money or having damaged the property. If you give proper notice and vacate without owing rent or causing damage, the landlord must return the security deposit to you within 30 days. 30 days. Okay, 30 days. And let's see, deposit limit. The landlord cannot require a security deposit that is amount more than 2 months rent. Wow, 2 months rent. Amen. 2 months rent. Wow. Escrow account. Oh, here we go. Landlords who own more than 10 rental units, including units owned by their spouses and or children. So it's got to be within your arm's length. 10 units. You've got to place the security deposits in a escrow account that is only for security deposits, or post a bond with the Superior Court. If kept in escrow, the landlord must give the tenants written notice about the location security deposit. Okay, cool. That's good. So security deposit in escrow or post bond with Superior Court for 10 units or more. Now, I think this is a good idea anyway. You don't want it to be in an operating account. Remember, even though it's all money, it's not your money, it's the tenant's money. That's why it's got to be separated. They really don't want you to have it. intermingled with your money. It's not your money. Okay, transfer of deposit. This is if somebody buys the parcel from you, buys the building or the house from you, then the deposit for the tenants transfer to the new owners, right? Refundable deposit, advance rent deposits that are refundable under the lease may be considered part of the security deposit. Application fees or deposits to hold an apartment until the lease is signed are not considered security deposits and are not refundable. Pet deposits may be refundable under security deposit or may be separable non-refundable fees depending on the terms of the lease. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've got that spelled out for sure. Move-in inspection. A formal move-in inspection is required for landlords who own more than 10 rental units, including units owned by spouse, children. This is a thing here. Themselves, spouse, children. Okay. It's important to know. So you want to make sure that you've got the move-in inspection. If you're the landlord, that you do this with your tenant as you walk through. Let's see, it's required for those who own more than 10 rental units. And during the inspection, you and the landlord will agree on an existing damage to the property so you're not charged for existing damage when you move out. Unless the landlord owns fewer than 10 units and does not contract with a management agent, meaning they're going to self-manage, the landlord must give you a complete list of the existing damage before accepting the security deposit, and the tenant must be allowed to inspect the unit to determine if the list is accurate. Both you and the landlord must sign the list, and the tenant should keep a copy. Yes. So basically walk through it. It's not a requirement, but you want to make sure that the landlord still has to give a notarized list, or not an itemized list of the existing damage. So you might as well just do the walkthrough yourself. Okay, promise repairs. You want to make sure that if you and a tenant walk through and you agree to the repair in writing, and actually we just put it right on the condition inspection sheet. We just say must repair fridge light or whatever needs repaired. Yeah. Okay, house rules. House rules is what you expect. What should be on the lease? Yep. Okay, so you've got a whole list of what should be on the lease. And then what happens issued during the lease. If stuff comes up, because things do and can break, things change. So you've got how to report it for a tenant, what is expected of the landlord, unless the lease says something else, the landlord is not responsible for problems that were obvious during their move-in, carpet cleaning, or providing appliances or fences. Huh, interesting. Except if the landlord has already provided these items, then the landlord must be responsible because that's what the tenant has got. If it came with a fridge and then the fridge breaks, guess what? The landlord has to repair or replace the fridge. What if a landlord fails to repair within a reasonable time after notice of the issues? The tenant can either file a lawsuit, which seems a little extreme. They can repair and deduct after proper notice to the landlord, or they can contact the local county or city housing code inspector, or they can move out. So it does have in here about landlord retaliation. In fact, I'll put that in here, landlord retaliation, yes. It is illegal for a landlord to evict you other than otherwise retaliate against you for requesting a repair or calling code enforcement. And there are other reasons that that may happen. However, you should be aware that contacting a code inspector may further strain your relationship with the landlord, and therefore this should be usually done after you tried to negotiate with the landlord to get the necessary repairs done. Probably a good idea. Okay, other damages. Can a tenant change a lock? Typically not without the landlord's permission. And if the lease is silent about changing locks, then technically you may change the locks, but you've got to give the landlord new keys. It says new keys when you move out. Okay, well, yeah, landlord is not paying utility bills. If the landlord is supposed to pay the utilities under the lease, landlords receiving electric service from Public Service Commission regulated provider, example, Georgia Power or Savannah Electric Power, have special rules that require the power company to give the tenants at least 5 days written notice prior to turning off the utility. And that way, if the landlord's not paying it, the tenant can jump in and say, hey, you're about to have it turned off. Visitors and tenants' use of the rental unit. Here's about pets. A violation of pet rules may allow the landlord to terminate a lease and try to evict you. Even if the landlord previously did not enforce the lease's pet rules, the landlord can change their mind and give you notice of their intent to enforce the rules. If the lease permits pets, the landlord cannot decide to prohibit pets until a new lease can begin. If you have a tenancy at will, meaning month to month, the landlord can terminate the tenancy at will with 60 days notice and start a new tenancy at will without pets. Okay. Okay, so pet policy can be enforced or a new lease can be signed without pets allowed. Interesting. Okay. Landlord access to rental unit. Okay, so this is called access. The lease will establish under what conditions a landlord may enter a unit. Typically, most leases say that landlord can have reasonable access after giving proper notice. If the landlord enters at unreasonable times, like the middle of the night, the landlord may be in breach of the lease. If the lease does not give the landlord a right to enter the unit, you can legally refuse as the tenant to allow the landlord to come in, except in cases of emergency. The best practice is for tenants and landlords to agree about how and when the landlord can access the unit. This is good communication because if they're trying to do a repair or they're trying to do a showing or something, you should let them and just be in good communication. But if the landlord is abusing the access, that's a problem too. Okay, subletting. Changes to the lease terms. Here we go. This is the rent increase. Rent can only be increased during a lease if the lease says that it may happen. The terms of the lease determine whether or not a landlord can raise rent and how often they can do so. So how often can rent be according to the lease? That's interesting. If the apartment complex changes owners, the new owners are generally subject to existing leases and cannot raise the rents or change the rules. If you are a tenant at will, the landlord must give 60-day notice of any rent increases. 60-day notice for month to month. And after 60 days, a new tenancy at will with the new rent amount. And it doesn't say how much the rent can increase. How much are rent increases in Georgia 2026? Doesn't say. Any amount. Wow. Okay. Okay. Subletting, early termination fees, duty to continue to pay rent, family violence and stalking exception. These are all pretty standard. Military service members, a tenant can have more flexibility to relocate and terminate a lease early based on military orders, which is normal. Termination, move out and inspection. Landlords who own more than 10 rental units, including units owned by them, their spouse, and or children, or who employ a management agent must provide a formal inspection of the unit on a move out or give back the tenant's security deposit. Within 3 business days after the lease terminates or a reasonable time landlord discovers that you left, landlord must inspect the unit and prepare a list of damage and estimated dollar value of such damage. And you may inspect the unit within 5 days after termination. You want to make sure that you are carefully have read through your move out inspection because this is where the deductions from the security deposit arise. Landlord cannot keep the security deposit to cover normal wear and tear. Normal wear and tear includes the expected slight damages that happens over time from tenants or guests' ordinary use of the unit, but not sledgehammers, not damage caused by the premises, household pets, chewed door frames, unpaid rent or late charges, unpaid pet fees, unpaid utilities, none of that. Can't do it. So you cannot use the security deposit as last month's rent. Nope. Okay, repair replacement amount. Repair replacement amount should be based on the condition of the unit when the tenant moved in. For example, if a tenant damaged a 10-year-old carpet to the extent that it can no longer be used, the tenant should be charged for the value of the 10-year-old carpet and not for the cost of the new replacement carpet. Amounts withheld must be reasonable. I like it. Returning the security deposit. We've talked about this, 30 days within. And what if the landlord does not know your new address? The security deposit and any statement of damages must be mailed to the last known address, even if that's the unit that was rented. And if it's returned undeliverable, the landlord is unable to locate you after a reasonable effort. The security deposit belongs back to the landlord 90 days after it was mailed. Wrongfully withholding security deposit. If the landlord refuses to refund the security deposit, you may try to get it back by suing in court. You may also sue for interest on the amount while it was wrongfully withheld, including attorney's fees. And attorney's fees is always this tricky thing, and a cost of filing the lawsuit. You can only recover amounts held by the landlord for damages that you disagreed with on the move out inspection. A landlord who owns more than 10 units or uses a management agent can be likely liable for 3 times the amount. Wow. 3 times. That's the penalty. Hello. Goodness. Okay, landlord retaliation. Landlord retaliation is alluded to, but let's go into it more on what it is. Landlord retaliation. If the landlord takes any of the following actions within 3 months, so typically it's trying to increase the rent, trying to evict someone, or trying to decrease the services. And there's usually a time frame. Not all places have a time frame, but in this case they do. They said within 3 months of the tenant's protected action, then the law presumes the landlord is retaliating unless they can basically show a lawful non-retaliatory reason for their action because everything's in writing, right? So evict, deprive the tenant access to the property, reducing the services to the tenant, increasing the rent, terminating the lease, and interfering materially with the tenant's right under the lease. And also what's probably not included in this, but not written, is that the landlord cannot take the tenant's personal property. Can't just say, hey, this is mine now. It doesn't work like that. So not all landlord actions are considered retaliatory. The law permits the landlord to take the following actions, even if they are done within 3 months of the tenant's permitted actions: increasing the rent or reducing services under the terms permitted within a lease because it was agreed to before the retaliation aspect, increasing the rent, filing an eviction because they've either got non-paid rent, damage to the property or another tenant breaches the lease. Basically, they're either serious misconduct or criminal acts, or the tenant holds over, which means they are a fixed lease and it ends abruptly with that word holdover. Retaliation remedies. If a retaliation claim is successful, the tenant may recover 1 month's rent plus $500 court. Okay, eviction. We haven't gotten into grace period or late fee amounts. Delivery of the signed lease isn't required. Standard warning letters we haven't gotten into yet. Renter's insurance isn't mentioned yet. Okay, a notice to pay, so failure of rent at least 3 business days before landlord files dispossessory of the tenants to pay rent or fees. Landlord is required to give a tenant a written notice to pay the rent and fees. Notice can be served on the tenant by any method provided in the lease or posted in a sealed envelope on the door unit, and I usually go shoulder height. Okay, let's see here. Tender defense, tenant answer. What is included in this? It's talking all about the court stuff. Like, how do you actually do this? Finding a lawyer. Here's some information about this. Landlords and tenants can search for Georgia lawyers. State Bar of Georgia's Find Lawyer feature, which actually we've got that in the hyperlink on the show notes. So it says not linked, not found, but I do have one in here. Let me go in here. Oh, this goes to the Q&A. Whoops, sorry, I've gone too far. Give me just a sec here. Let me go back. Okay. Legal resources. No cost legal. So the Legal Aid Society, Georgia Legal Services Program, Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. In fact, these are really good. I'm going to add these to the show notes right now because these are pretty good. Atlanta Legal Aid. Copy link. Yeah. Sure we get this right. Okay, and then Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. Okay, so State Bar of Georgia. Okay. Other legal assistance. So I've got the Georgia Legal Assistance Aid Program here. Georgia Housing Search. This is more tenant geared, but miscellaneous military service members as tenants. talks about this early lease termination because of family violence or stalking protection. Roommates. Let's talk about roommates for a second. If you plan to rent a unit with a roommate, be aware each roommate in a tenant relationship with a landlord can be responsible for the full amount of the rent due unless the lease describes otherwise. Joint and severable liability. For example, if all the roommates sign the lease and one moves out, the others will be responsible for the full rent. However, if you end up paying more for your share, you can sue a former roommate to recover the difference. How I put this in all of my leases is I am renting a unit. I am not renting to a person. And so if I've got one or two or three people, two or three or four people that are all roommates, I need one person to step up. I receive one security deposit, one rent payment, and that way it's none of this, well, I paid my rent, so you can't evict me. No, that's not true. I can evict you if you guys don't pay collectively. That's how roommates work. So they've got to work together. Foreclosure, I think. So then it's got a whole bunch of eviction Q&A. Improper service, tenancy at will. I'm still looking for like late rent payment. Space for counterclaims. I'm going to court. What do you hear? By the way, I know it's talking about how to actually get ready for court. If this is your first time, if you're like in this situation and that's why you're listening to this podcast, if you're going to court and you have a court date, please do yourself a favor. Go there ahead of time, even the day before. Walk through everything you need to know. Where do you park? Do you need quarters for the machine? How do you do the metal detectors? What can you take in? What can you not take in? What buttons do you press to go up to the courtroom you're supposed to be in? The more familiar you are, the less freaked out you will be. So if this is your first time doing court stuff, please make sure you do a full dress rehearsal ahead of time. And actually, if I'm being honest, go and watch other landlord cases before your stuff, like the week before. Go and watch other landlords, hear what other people are saying, because this is exactly what you're going to have to do. If you're going in cold, you will sometimes freeze up, you get stressed, you may go to the wrong location, the wrong building. It gets really, really upsetting. So make sure you are taking a look in advance if you're doing this. Oh, and of course now it's got an index. Okay, so that's just the first hyperlink here. So I'm going to go to the next one. This is a presentation from Legal Aid Atlanta, Georgia Tenant Rights and Responsibilities. This was given in May of 2024. There may be changes here, but there are a couple of good basics on this. So this is more tenant geared, but I'm putting it in just because there's some basic definitions that actually are really good on how it works. Extended stay hotels, not all housing situations are tenants. Follow the terms of the lease, pay the rent, be careful with guests, and make sure you're paying attention to all the rules. Landlord is just as bound to the lease as the tenant. Make sure you read it. Early termination of the lease is possible, but only sometimes there's actual reasons why. What to do if something needs repair? What about if you're not getting the repairs done? Retaliatory eviction. This is all defined. We've already talked about some of this. There are no moratoriums in Georgia, at least not at the time of this presentation, which is 2024. It's almost 2 years old now. So make sure you're doing your own information about this. This is just informational. Served by Marshall, a process server. If you've got questions about this, yes, you can call one of the lawyers and we'll get into the different hyperlinks on how you can do this. But you can also call either a process server or a bailiff. They're also known as a bailiff or a marshal, or you can talk to your local sheriff. They may or may not answer your questions. They may just say, you can't do anything until the court helps you. But just educate yourself. Even if you start to know who the players are and they're in your phone, you almost feel better because you're a little more familiar with it. Yeah. So it goes through some of the standard documents, how evictions work, common defenses, counterclaims as well, and then ending the tenancy, security deposits. Okay, so, and then of course they've got the contact information for Legal Aid Society in Atlanta. Okay, this one, I think this links to the same handbook. It does. It's the same handbook. Okay, we've already gone through this, so I'm going to keep going. Now, this one is the Official Code of Georgia Annotated, archive.org. And the reason I looked into this is because of the, in fact, I'm going to expand this. This was all about, God, I can't even read this thing. It was about abandoned property of a tenant. And this is, goodness, I can't even hardly read this. Okay, I'm just going to leave it because I can't read it. But it's a link to give you the source document for abandoned items. Okay, this one is the Georgia Landlord Coalition. And so if you are interested in learning more from other Georgia landlords, this might be something that you would consider joining as a member. Talks about how you do the different memberships and what resources you get. But again, if you want to learn from other Georgia landlords or you have questions, here's your think tank. Here you go. View membership options. Here we go. Atlanta area group protests for rent cancellation reinstitution of, okay, here you go. GeorgiaLandlordCoalition.com. Georgia Apartment Association. Here's another one that I was looking at. If you want to know more about membership, my links aren't working very well. I'm not really sure why I can't. Okay. There we go. Affiliated, join GAA. Okay, Georgia Apartment Associations. Okay. You may only join if there is not an affiliate in your area. Okay, so if there is an affiliate in your area, wherever you are, so 5 affiliated associations, you want to join the right one in your region, right? So this one's Greater Augusta, Atlanta Apartment Association, Coastal Georgia, Greater Columbus, Mid Georgia. So you want to make sure that you are, they each have their own website, right? So you want to make sure that whatever county you're in, that you're joining the right one, and you can at least talk to them. Just give them a call, whoever they are, and just say, hey, I'm a new landlord, or I'm a seasoned landlord and something weird's going on. Do you think membership would help me? The answer is probably yes, but check it out. Okay, let's go to this one. This one's Find a Lawyer. This is State Bar of Georgia. And you can search based on your zip code, free consultation. And typically, even if you just need a 30-minute consultation, it may be free, but even if they charge you 35 or 50 bucks, it's might be easier to just keep you going, especially if it's a DIY situation. They might be able to guide you a little bit. And if you need more help, then they're there, right? GeorgiaLegalaid.org. Self-help center for court-based self-help center. I'm just going to click on this one so you at least have it. There are several court-based self-help and legal information centers, so that you can see this Law Information Center website. So based on the county that you are in, and there's lots of hyperlinks, you can actually help yourself and ask questions. And then there's some featured guides over here. Foreclosure, eviction, consumer. Let's just click on the eviction one. Okay, so and then there's a YouTube video, which is even cool. That's even more cool. Transcript, landlord can ask court order to evict a tenant if the tenant breaks the term of the lease, like not paying rent. And then there's a whole bunch of videos in here, a ton about eviction and what to do. Now find legal help. There's a whole bunch of phone numbers in here, all the different legal aid societies, Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. I've got these hyperlinks in the show notes now, but you can give them a call. And then all the brochures about eviction, how to answer, what to do, security deposits, all of that. Okay. And then I did a quick Google search about what the rent increase is in Georgia. Let me just say how much are late rent fees in Georgia. And there's no statutory cap on late rent fees. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my screen share to my bingo card. And then I'm going to go through that and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay. So I'm in the bingo card location. Georgia, tenant application fee. Yes, you can charge a tenant application fee, and a fee implies it is not refundable. It can be applied to first month's rent. Grace period for late rent without penalty. There's no grace period per se, but it looks like either 3 days or 7 days that the landlord has to demand the rent. So it's kind of always a gray area if you call that a grace period. It's not really a grace period. You know the rent's due. No late fee is mentioned. There's no multiple or anything, no flat amount, percentage, max amount. But typically in my history, it looks like the late fee has to be reasonable, right? Must be reasonable. Hang on a sec. Okay, security deposit. A tenant can pay a security deposit in money, and it can be the security deposit cannot be more than 2 times the rent. And it does have to be in a separate account. That a security deposit has to be in a separate account, either in an escrow account, or the landlord can post bond with Superior Court if they in their unit, meaning them, their spouses, or their children, own and operate 10 or more rental units, or they have a property manager. So basically, they want to make sure that the tenant's money that is the security deposits is not commingled with your operating accounts. That's what that is all about. There is a laundry list of lease wording and details that should be in the lease. That's good. Is there an emergency contact required in the event of tenant abandonment, incapacitation, death, or imprisonment? Yes, this is something that was listed in there in the Georgia Landlord-Tenant Handbook, and I'm shocked because it's the first time I've seen it that in Georgia they can request the identity of the nearest relative. That is a great idea. That's good. Pet and animals, is there a pet deposit or pet rent? Yes, pet policy can be enforced. There can be a separate pet deposit, but again, all the deposits collective cannot be more than twice the rent. And if a pet policy isn't enforced and then you're on a periodic lease, a tenant is on a periodic lease like month to month, then the landlord can give 60 days notice. They're ending this periodic tenancy and they can sign up a new lease that says no pets. So just be aware that's in there. There was no mention of a delivery of a signed lease requirement. Condition inspection at move-in, yes, within 10 days. And there was also a bunch of chatter in there about if, again, if a landlord, their spouse, or their children collectively own 10 or more units, or there is a property manager, that they have to do a walkthrough with the tenant within 10 days. And if the landlord collectively doesn't own 10 units, then they don't have to do this. But what they do have to do is they have to give an itemized list of the existing damage that the tenant then has to confirm. So either way, you still have to monitor what's the existing damage. Standard warning letters or wording. No, there wasn't anything that I found. Required maintenance inspections. Nope, didn't find anything of that. How often can the rent be increased? According to the lease, they could do it once a month if they wanted. My goodness. And what is proper notice on a rent increase? 60 days for a month-to-month lease. How much can the rent increase? Any amount. My goodness. Renter's insurance was not discussed. Abuse of access was defined. It was defined and it should be reasonable hours. And again, they were pushing it saying it should be in the lease. What is reasonable hours? When can a landlord access? Landlord retaliation defined and or timing. The time of eviction, rent increase or decrease in services. Yes, the landlord retaliation was defined and it's within 3 months. However, if within those 3 months a natural rent increase or a natural service deduction was going to occur, then that is still permitted and not considered retaliatory. Is the end of a fixed lease abrupt or is it automatically converting? No, the word holdover was used, which tells me it is abrupt. Is there an acceleration clause if early termination? There is not. In fact, there was early termination fees all over the place. And plus there was lots of mention about early termination due to military service or to a safety concern, namely domestic violence or stalking. Condition inspection at move out. Yes, you've got to do that, especially if you're going to deduct off the security deposit. The security deposit has to be returned within 30 days and they cannot use the last month's deposit as the last month's rent, cannot do that. And is there a penalty for a landlord not returning the deposit? Yes, up to 3 times the amount plus all the court fees. That was amazing. I didn't get into a lot of eviction timing. And the other thing that didn't happen, abandoned items. Nowhere in there was it discussed about abandoned items, how to deal with abandoned items from a tenant departing. How do we um, deal with abandoned items from a tenant in Georgia 2026? Let's just see. Okay, so this is what Google/AI is telling me. In Georgia, landlords must follow specific legal procedures when dealing with abandoned personal property left by a tenant. This is something, if you are concerned, especially since I do not have a hyperlink for this, make sure you're talking to either your associations, you're hiring an attorney or seeking legal help, or you're talking to legal aid because they can guide you a heck of a lot more than this one. This is just trying to get you a starting point. So if you are in the situation where you've got an abandoned unit, with personal property in it. This is just informational. So landlord must provide written notice to the tenant detailing the abandoned property and timeline for retrieval, and must be sent to the tenant's last known address, preferably by certified mail, which is likely the rental unit. During the notice period, landlords are required to store the abandoned property securely to prevent damage. It does not have to be in an actual storage locker, can be in a garage somewhere, but still is under landlord's care. Claiming property disposal after the notice period, landlords can dispose of the abandoned property. And if the property is worth less than $500, the landlord may dispose of it 10 days after the written notice. If it's more than $500 in value, the landlord must file a writ of possession after 30 days and may dispose of it through public sale. Okay. I think what I'm going to do, abandoned personal property laws in Georgia. I'm going to collect this link and I'm going to put this, I don't normally put the national, there's a lot of national resources. I don't normally include it, but I don't have anything for abandoned items, which is kind of crazy to me. So I put that's legal clarity. I don't normally endorse that kind of stuff, but in this situation, this is going to be helpful. Okay, let me jump back to the bingo card. Okay, so it looks like if it's less than $500 in value, because you've got value of items, administrative inventory, storage, timing, disposition. If it's less than $500 in value, then a landlord can dispose of it within 10 days of proper notice. If it's more than $500, then within 30 days, they can file a writ with the court. Yeah, so I did add a link for that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to bring back up my script here so that I can go through this. Okay, so we're winding down everything for the state of Georgia. Each of my podcasts doing location-specific episodes is set up the same way, answering the same 4 questions. What are the basics of that location? What are the nuances of that location? What is different that stands out? What are some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant? And where to get help in the local real estate or province? Real estate area or province. As I did that, you saw me keep track on the bingo card, and then I shared screen on the bingo card. I did add a few hyperlinks as we went through, so I think there's either 11 or 12 hyperlinks in the show notes, so make sure you're looking. This is the same format for every location-specific episode, so if you're interested in another geographic area, you already know what I'm going to talk about, just in a different location. One more time, this episode is not all-inclusive. You must research further in your specific area, including your county, regional district, parish, city, or any other governing body that involves your rental location, but today's episode is designed to get you started. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are that you're either new to real estate or you want to be new to real estate in Georgia, or maybe you're a seasoned landlord in Georgia, and I appreciate you listening. Things you can do to help yourself get more educated, get more familiar with the Georgia Residential Landlord-Tenant Law, and then also get in the same room either physically or virtually with other Georgia landlords. You can do that by jumping on social media. You can join an association, and I provided a couple of different links, but get in the same room where people that are like-minded with you, Georgia landlords, that are asking these same questions. So I hope you enjoyed today's show all about Georgia. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more expert advice and real stories from across the rental property world. I'm recording this episode today from Maui, Hawaii. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me in the next episode live right now in the library, episode 221, about the Canadian province of Nova Scotia. I'll see you there.